Welcome back to another video. This time we're covering cross contour drawing. Now as you can see, I've already laid in the construction drawing part of my drawing down. I am drawing from observation here. I have 7 objects in front of me that I am drawing, and so if you haven't seen the construction drawing video yet, hop on over to my channel and watch that one first, because as you can see, I've already done most of the work here, although in my construction drawing video they're very simple basic shape objects, and in this setup there's a few objects that are just a little more complex. So I am going to finish up the construction on a few of these items so that you can kind of learn how to do some of these more complex items, how to draw them rather. And then I'll get into the cross contour line. I am using mostly an HB pencil. I started out with a 2B, moved on to the HB, but I have a 2H handy in case I want to get real super crisp lines. As I start to make my lines more crisp, I kind of go to the harder lead pencil. So anyway, now basically what I have here is a coffee mug, a cube, 2 pumpkins, toilet paper roll, tennis ball, and pear. So I want to show you for some of these fruits how you can accurately draw them. So as you can see with the pear, what I did initially was I just laid in the body of the pear as a circle just for placement, used the sighting technique to measure and make sure that proportionally it was in the right spot and seems to be the right size. And then what I do is I kind of start drawing in an angular fashion, just to kind of give a simplified version of this pear on the page. It's just a very quick, easy way to kind of sketch in the basic shape of the pear, and I can obviously smooth out those curves later, but when you're initially kind of setting things up, you can just draw this simplified version of the form. So then I can do things, before I get too fancy with, you know, making it detailed, I can start doing things like, so the end of the stem, where does that line up with the sphere? Well, in my drawing, it lines up with the center. I can use my pencil as an imaginary line and check, okay, does it line up with the center? Actually, it's not quite, it's a little bit over. So that might tell me, okay, so maybe I need to shorten this a little bit, bring that stem maybe down a little bit as well, because it doesn't quite touch the edge there of the toilet paper roll. So I just went ahead and made that little adjustment there since I noticed that. Anyway, that's how I like to start out these more complex forms, is I place them as more basic shapes, and then they can get more complex after I'm confident that the proportions and placement are correct. So I'm pretty happy with the placement of the pear. So like I mentioned, now I can go through, instead of holding my pencil using the side of the lead like I was, now I can be a little more precise. I can hold the pencil in such a way to use the point of the pencil. Make sure that you are keeping your pencil sharpened. And now I can just go back and forth between my pencil and my eraser to clean up these lines, to round out some of the shape wherever it needs rounding out. Now don't forget to keep looking back and forth between your drawing and the still life. I think sometimes it can be easy you know, to stop checking your work, you know, once you're like, oh, okay, everything is set, you know, proportions look good. But you never know when you're going to find something that needs little bits of adjustment. So it is good to keep checking your work. So anyway, just cleaning up a little bit of this. And it looks like the stem ends just about there. And I'm going to give a little bit of thickness to the stem as well. Okay. So now it's looking a lot more like a pear. So that's how I would approach the pear. Now the pumpkin is a little more tricky than the pear because, as you know, pumpkins have these partitions in their shape. So I'm going to show you, I've started to with a small one. You can see I'm still using those angular lines to block the basic shapes in for the pumpkin. But I'm going to show you how I did that with this one. As you can see, this was kind of the first stage. The overall height and width, I got the placement down, used the sighting technique, made sure that, you know, overall the pumpkin is sitting in the right spot for the drawing. Now that I'm confident about that, I can start doing the partitions like I did on this one. So I'm sure there's many ways to go about this, but I'll just show you how I like to do it. I kind of start out with just some little ovals for placement of where, like how big each partition that I see is going to be, so that I can kind of get an idea before I start drawing the vertical lines here. Okay, and I see a little bit of one on the side there. Okay, let me count also. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 total partitions all the way around. That's good to know. So the one that's most facing us is right about here. So as you can see, again, using the side of the pencil lead and just kind of blocking things in. Okay, now the one to the left of it is about here. And then the next one is about there. After I don't need those ovals anymore, I can just erase them. They're just there to get things started. Okay, let's see. So each time I make a mark, right before I make the mark, I'm checking back at the still life to see how my placement is looking, how everything's looking. Okay. Okay, and then I do see one poking out over here. Now, just as a review, again, you don't need to use, and actually you shouldn't be using heavy pressure. Try not to grip the pencil roll hard or anything like that. Try to keep a real soft touch with your mark making. Now I'm just making little adjustments. If I feel like some of the partitions need to be wider or thinner, I'm just going through and seeing what needs to be done. Let's see, this one kind of goes to about there. And then, of course, the little stem overlaps it. And then we have one there. Okay, so it's looking pretty good now. It's definitely more recognizable as a pumpkin now. I am going to make this one a little bit wider. And I think this one could move over just a little bit, like so. That's looking pretty good. Okay, and of course, once you're really happy with the placement of the partitions and the overall shape, then you can go through and start smoothing things out and rounding things out. The reason why I do those angular shapes first before I do the rounder shapes is because it's so much easier for your brain to be looking out and recognizing corrections that need to be made when things are simplified. When things are complex, that becomes a little more difficult. So anytime that you can start out drawing something in a simplified fashion is going to help you in the long run. So, so anyway, I would just go through and I would smooth out, still looking at the objects in real life as I do this, just to make sure I'm not missing anything important, but I do have the basic guideline down on the page of where these lines are going. I'm just rounding them a little bit more and making them a bit smoother transitions for these lines. Okay. Now I will finish the majority of this smoothing out process off camera. For now, I want to jump into the cross contour lines to show you how to do that. Let's see, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and of course the mug here, if you have something like that type of a shape, keep in mind this is just like that toilet paper roll from the construction drawing video. It's a cylinder shape, but the mug is just a slightly more complex version of the cylinder shape, but it still has that basic shape. So I still did the same process initially to lay it in like I did the toilet paper roll, but I just had to put a couple little additions on there, such as the handle and the base to make it look like a mug, okay? Of course, the toilet paper roll is back. It's right over here. So let's jump into cross contour. What is cross contour? Well, it's a way of drawing that's kind of like an exercise to help you learn more about how to draw things looking three-dimensional before we jump into drawing with value. This is a way to do it with line, and it's kind of just like an exercise for your brain. It helps you problem solve and helps you understand how to figure out how a thing that you're seeing in real life, which looks 3D, how can you make it convincingly look 3D on a 2D surface, right? So that's kind of like the point of doing these cross contour drawings. Now the next question is how to do it. The first thing that I like to tell my students on like how to wrap your head around doing cross contour is just imagine that these items have rubber bands wrapping around them. So for example, now as you can see my view, I'm looking a little bit down at these objects. I see the top of the paper towel roll, top of the pumpkin, top of the pumpkin. I can't see the bottom of the pumpkin, right? Because I'm looking, my perspective is I'm looking a little bit down. So I can see the top of that cube, so on and so forth, right? So for example, if I was going to do some cross contour on this sphere, I am imagining that I'm looking down at the sphere just like the pumpkins. So I'm just gonna guess, like if this was an apple, the stem might be right there, right? If it was an apple sitting upright. So I'll just use that as the center of where I'm gonna place some lines that wrap around the form. So I'm just imagining that there are rubber bands that are just wrapping around this sphere, and once I add those lines, then you can see this sphere is starting to look less like a circle, more like a sphere. In other words, it's looking more three-dimensional, right? And it's up to you how, you know, spaced out, like how close together or far apart these lines are, but just try to keep them consistent. So so try to just try to be thoughtful about how you're spacing them out, I guess is what I'm saying. Just to aesthetically make it look nice, right? Now, if you are bringing your lines all the way around to wrap around the form, I would suggest making the lines that come in front of the object slightly thicker, just so that the viewer knows that those are in front. So I will come back to this one and clean up the lines, but that's just kind of my initial lay-in of those cross contour lines. Now I could do it the other way as well. I could wrap some lines around vertically if I wanted to, like so. So I would want to use basically horizontally. I did some ovals, and I'm doing ovals vertically as well. So you want to go all the way to one edge of the sphere to the other to make it look like they're wrapping all the way around. Okay. Let's see. So how about a cylinder shape? How would you do that? Well, we'll treat the center of that toilet paper roll as kind of like the center of where our lines are going to come out from. I could do a couple center lines, vertical and horizontal here, and maybe I'll do some in between. And those will be the lines that I continue down. So one continues down the side here. This one continues right in front, and this one continues down here. The other ones are on the side, so we can't really see them, and then there's ones in the back. So that's how you do it vertically for a cylinder. In terms of horizontally, you would just copy the same ovals that you have at the top and the bottom. So you would want the same width of the oval. Okay. Just like that. So see how it looks like it's looking 3D now. It looks like there's these lines wrapping around the form. Now, organic shapes can be kind of tricky. I would suggest for things like apples and pears and things like that, use the stem as kind of an indicator of where the top is, obviously, and then of course the bottom. You know how pears have and apples, they have a point at the bottom, but if the pear is, if I can see the little bit of the top of the pear, then I can't really see the bottom. But if this pear was transparent, the bottom of the pear might be somewhere around there. So I'll just kind of use that as an idea that, okay, so if I have a line that comes out, now I can see how this pear is shaped. It kind of has a dip right here because it's pear shaped, right? It tapers out. So my line is going to reflect that. It would go all the way around, and then it would wrap down to the bottom in the back. Okay. So this definitely takes some practice, and it's hard to wrap your brain around it at first, but it's worth a try. Okay. Of course, if you're going the other way, it would wrap around this way, like so, okay? Let's do another simple one. Let's do the cube. That one you could probably figure out on your own because you're kind of just mimicking all the lines that you already kind of see with the edges of the cube. So for example, on this side here, I could have some vertical lines, sort of spacing those out like so. And I could have some horizontal lines. Well, these are angled, so I would just copy that same angle like so, and they would just continue. So see how this line would go this way because it's continuing, right? So you wouldn't want to stop here and then have a line right here, because the idea is that the line wraps all the way around the form. So this one would be disjointed. Hopefully that makes sense. So we would have one coming up here and then continuing that line onto the top of the cube like that, okay? The mug would be treated the same way as the toilet paper roll because they're both cylinders, right? So you would have these kind of rounded lines going all the way around. Now for the pumpkin, same kind of an idea as the pear. Let's see, and again, I'm looking a little bit down at the top. Obviously, just because there's partitions, we already kind of have some lines going vertically, so you don't necessarily have to give it more unless you want to. I think it'd be more beneficial to try the horizontal ones. So this one's a little more tricky to keep it looking convincing. Just don't forget to keep them somewhat spaced out, right? And of course, I will clean up these lines later and show you the finished result at the end, just so that this demo doesn't get too long. But that's the basic idea of cross contour. Now, of course, if you want to kind of clarify the information here, just because there's so many lines on the page, you can certainly use line quality variation for that. For example, I might slightly darken and thicken the outer contour lines here of the shape, and then maybe the cross contour lines stay really light and thin, or maybe the cross contour lines that are in front of the item also get some thickness, but then the ones that are going in the back can be lighter. With this type of drawing, even though you're starting with a construction drawing and then adding the cross contour, and construction drawing you draw things as if they were see-through, you want to start out with that, but if the lines get too confusing, you can erase some of those lines that go in the back just to kind of help you kind of clarify where everything is. Like, I did not continue that back line all the way through. I certainly could, but I felt like things are already so complex, I didn't want to do that. But you can do a little bit, you know, here and there, just to show that you know how things wrap around. Like, I did include that full oval shape that goes all the way around. So I think it's good to lay it in, even if you have to erase a few things later, just to clarify some of the areas so it doesn't get too messy. The main thing is that you're getting the practice of the cross contour and learning how to create these really convincing three-dimensional objects. So anyway, I'm going to clean up my lines here and I'll show you the finished product at the end of the video. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope that this demo clarified some questions that you may have had on cross contour drawing. So good luck with your own cross contour drawings.